Thanks for joining us today. I'm Linda Lidlaw, Board Chair. Welcome to eCentral Energy's 87th Annual Meeting. The annual report and the agenda for today's meeting have been included in the registration bags that you got. The agenda includes the list of meeting rules and also last year's annual meeting minutes. And a recording of this meeting will be available on our website at a later date. With respect to members of all beliefs, we're now going to open the meeting with an invocation by Bethany Lomberg. She works in our Braham front office.
Thank you, Linda. I invite you all to pray with me. Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support. We pray you bless our conversations and that we continue to lead with integrity and humility. Father, we plan our course, but we pray you guide our steps. Enable us to think and strategize in ways that will achieve our greatest goals in serving our members. As we plan for our future as a cooperative and move forward with new endeavors, give us courage and help us to remember our humble roots. Lastly, Lord, thank you for each and every person here tonight. Bless us always, make your face shine on us, and be gracious to us. We ask all of this in your mighty name. Amen.
We're now going to recognize the brave men and women who volunteer to serve our country at home and abroad as part of the United States Armed Services. We honor those who are prisoners of war, missing in action, and those who have lost their lives. Please stand if you are able, remove your hats, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is behind me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As chair of ECE's board, my role for this evening is to facilitate. It's the same thing I do at our monthly meetings with the board of directors. As your representatives, we take our job very seriously as stewards of your electric cooperative. We are diligent in our governance of it. And by the number of faces in the room, I can see that you also value your cooperative. I'm so glad that you took the time to join us tonight. Thank you. We have 200 members registered for today's meeting. Therefore, I declare a quorum is present and call the Cooperative's 2023 annual meeting to order. You will have the opportunity to answer questions later in the meeting. A list of the meeting rules are printed in the agenda. If there's no objection, the meeting rules will stand approved as printed. Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, the rules are approved. Joseph Morley, Secretary-Treasurer, is prepared to read the official notice of the meeting and the certificate of mailing. The notice of the meeting was previously mailed to each member in accordance with the cooperative's bylaws. If there is no objection, the official notice of the meeting and the certificate of mailing will stand approved in accordance with the information mailed to each voting member. Are there any objections? Hearing no objection, the official notice of the meeting and the certificate of mailing will stand approved in accordance with the information mailed to each voting member. Last year's annual meeting minutes are also printed inside the agenda. If there's no objection, the meeting minutes will stand approved as written. Are there any objections? Hearing no objection, the minutes of the meeting will stand approved. During the summer of 2020, Steve Schertz retired, and Justin Johns was named as his successor. Since then, our annual meetings have all been virtual or hybrid. So even though he has been a part of our annual meeting for years, this is his first in-person meeting as CEO. With nearly 15 years at East Central Energy, Justin has a Master of Arts in Strategic Leadership from Bethel University. He also holds a Class A Master Electrician license. More important than that are his years of experience and his passion for the energy industry. We are proud of his servant leadership style, his inclusive nature, and his understanding of the cooperative business model. Please welcome Justin to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As Linda said, I'm Justin Johns, President and CEO of East Central Energy. And in 87 years, I'm just the 5th CEO, and that is an honor that I don't take lightly. It's a pleasure to serve you. I can't tell you how good it feels to see our members in person after so many years. Thank you for coming out tonight to view some electric vehicles, meet with your neighbors over delicious appetizers, hopefully win some prizes at the end of the night, and maybe dodge a few raindrops. Also, at the end of the meeting, we will be sharing results of the director election. Well, there's a few people waiting for that information. We haven't seen this many candidates in years, which shows just how engaged our members are in their local cooperative. What does the term rural roots mean to you? Do you think of small towns like Braham and the way they pull together to help those in need? Do you imagine cornfields, cows, miles of country roads? Here at ECE, when we think rural, we think of neighbors helping neighbors. When we hear roots, we remember those salt-of-the-earth farmers who worked the soil and dreamed of innovation. By joining together, they did what no for-profit company would do in 1936. They brought electricity to their homes and farms, changing our rural landscape forever. We're here today because of them, because those deep, strong roots enable us to branch out, tethered to our foundation, while daring to grow in new directions. Tonight, we will look back at 2022 and see how far we've come in 87 years. Linda took a moment to thank the staff from the Braham Event Center. I'd like to take a moment just to recognize the employees of ECE, if you'd join me. Dedicated group of individuals, I can tell you that. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the current ECE Board of Directors. They're members who represent the communities within each of our 6 districts. Directors, please stand when your name is called and remain standing until all have been introduced. Please hold your applause until I list all of them. From District 1, we have Shelley Nault and Greg Kaznicka. In District 2, David Deutschlander and Lonnie Johnson. In District 3, Wayne Eller and Rick Olson. From District 4, Gary Bai and Joe Morley. In District 5, Jerry Tweed and Linda Leitala. And from District 6, Ron Volker and Jim Jessic. Put a round of applause for these 5 folks. This year we have 2 directors who have made the decision to retire from the ECE board. On behalf of ECE's employees, the members, and their fellow directors, I'd like to thank District 2 Director Dave Deutschlander for his 19 total years of service to the board and to the members. In those 19 years, David has seen many changes within the co-op, including the forming and dissolution of Northland Connect Broadband, the Head of the Lakes merger completion, ECE's 75th anniversary, the purchase of our first EV, and he's had the opportunity to work with 3 of the 5 CEOs of ECE. I'd also like to recognize Gary Bai for his 8 years of service on the board. Prior to joining the board, Gary served for 25 years as a CEO before retiring in 2010. The world was a lot different in 1985. I was 7 years old. And Gary has been instrumental in making the cooperative what it is today. On a personal note, I want to thank both David and Gary for their service. David always brought a very practical nature to the meetings, very keen on representing the members' interests and taking care of them in any way possible. And Gary has really been, in many ways, a personal mentor to me, nudging me along on decisions that I might have been a little bit timid about, and providing the right words of wisdom when I needed them. So thank you to both of you. Will you join me in thanking them? We don't have any legislators present tonight. Hopefully they're busy in St. Paul doing good things for rural Minnesota. When it came time to choose the 2022 winner of ECE's Touchstone Energy Community Award, A Place for You in Pine City stood out for the work that they do to end homelessness. A Place for You just marked its 10th year of serving the community. It is a local nonprofit located in Pine City that provides temporary shelter and support to individuals facing homelessness who reside in Pine, Kanabec, Carlton, Chisago, Isanti, and Mille Lacs counties. The facility also provides one-on-one case management, mental health referrals, and housing resource navigation. Executive Director Matt Viney is here representing A Place for You. Would you please join me on stage, Matt, to say a few words about your organization?
Hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I want to tell you how grateful I am to accept the award on behalf of the shelter. It is a truly amazing organization. On behalf of A Place for You, thank you, Essential Energy, for recognizing the hard work that happens at our shelter and giving us a platform to reach more people. I also want to thank the great leaders, partners, staff, and participants who created and guided A Place for You, especially Mary Kay Sloan and Deacon Jean Brever, who founded the shelter back in 2012. As you said, A Place for You started 10 years ago, and in that time, we've served over 800 people. With hundreds of calls each year for help, A Place for You always is looking for creative ways to reduce the trauma of homelessness. This winter, we found funding to purchase cots, and we started offering our lobby area for people to sleep overnight when we had the coldest winter nights this year. Many of you've heard that we've been working with Pine County since 2021 on a grant awarded through the CARES Act. This grant will allow us to retrofit our existing shelter space and increase our capacity from 9 beds to 14. Construction is scheduled to start in the next month, so we're very excited about it. This project will also set the stage for other goals that we have at A Place for You. Having a licensed kitchen so that we can prepare meals and reduce the food costs, along with reducing energy consumption with higher efficiency equipment, and becoming prepared for the potential of adding ground source heat and other things like solar panels. We're always seeking to cut costs so that we can serve more people and serve them better. Because we feel very strongly that everyone deserves a safe place to stay. A Place for You will be celebrating its 11th year, and we have a gala coming up on September 29th, just over a month from our expected retrofit completion date. The gala is one of the most exciting times of the year for the shelter, where we get to get together with other people that are like-minded and share stories and celebrate our journey. If you want to know more about A Place for You, you can find us at apfy.org or on Facebook at A Place for You Shelter. Thanks again for this opportunity.
I think A Place for You is just a great example of how communities like the ones we live in work, people helping each other, coming together to help people in times of need. At ECE, 60 cents of every dollar of revenue goes towards our power supply. And for that reason, our relationship with our power supplier, Great River Energy, is critical. Great River Energy is a not-for-profit wholesale electric power cooperative serving 28 distribution cooperatives. GRE's systems provide reliable power for 1.7 million people. Great River Energy has taken important steps to meet members' energy needs today, tomorrow, and long into the future while recording impressive financial and operational performance. Here with us today is David Sagu, President and CEO of Great River Energy, to provide us with an update on all things GRE. Let's welcome David to the stage.
Thank you, Justin. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Just a quick point before I get started. I had the opportunity to sit at this front table with Matt and people from A Place for You. And when they told me a little bit about their organization, I actually had my phone on me and I just looked them up. It's very easy to look up what they do. There was a statistic that really stuck with me that Matt didn't mention. They have a 42% permanent placement after they bring people to their shelters. That's tremendous. And if I could take them out of Pine City and bring them to Minneapolis with me, I would. We need that. Okay, just well done. Well, as Justin said, I'm CEO of Great River Energy. We are your wholesale power supplier, as you know. We're a cooperative. And just as all of you are member owners of East Central Energy and 26 other distribution cooperatives are member owners of Great River Energy. And here you see a map of the service territory that we have. You see the 27 distribution systems that we serve. But collectively, we serve about 2/3 of the state of Minnesota geographically and parts of western Wisconsin, providing electric service to over 1.7 million people throughout this area. Total assets of $3.8 billion and annual revenues are just over $1.1 billion right now. We have 547 employees. About half of those are headquartered in Maple Grove. They work alongside me at our headquarters building just northwest of the Twin Cities. The rest are in outposts throughout Minnesota. You can imagine with a service territory this large, we have folks really all over the region that we serve. We have 3,100 megawatts of generation, which includes 960 megawatts of wind. And some of you go way back with us, and it wasn't that long ago that Great River Energy had no wind in our portfolio, no renewables whatsoever. And now 960 megawatts, and we're adding some additional wind, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. We have 4,300 miles of transmission lines throughout the state. We're the second largest electric company in the state of Minnesota and one of the largest generation and transmission cooperatives in the country. We're governed by a 22-member board of directors. You thought East Central had a big board. We've got a big board, right? And all the board members that serve on the GRE board are also members of the boards of directors of distribution systems that are a part of us. So that's where our board members come from, the boards of the distribution systems throughout the system. East Central is lucky you get 2 directors, so 2 of the directors on our board, 2 of the 22 are from East Central. We have Lonnie Johnson and Linda Lytle. Serving on our board. We very much appreciate your service to our board. It's a joy to have you. And I should point out that Joe Morley was a long-time member on our board of directors as well. And so we appreciate the service that you all put in. We also have a group called the Member Manager Group. And this is a group of all of the CEOs of all of those distribution systems that we serve. And of course, Justin Johns is a part of that. Our board of directors and our Member Manager Group each meet monthly. And their meetings are staggered. So what that means is every 2 weeks, I and my staff meet with a full board of directors or all of the CEOs of the distribution systems that we serve. Open and honest communication and transparency is critical in the operation of a large cooperative like Great River Energy. And having these frequent meetings really enable that for us. And so we're very lucky that we have dedicated people who will spend so much of their time working on the issues at the G&T level for us at Great River Energy. Next slide, please. There are 10 wholesale suppliers of electricity in Minnesota doing business right now, including Great River Energy. This graph shows Great River Energy's wholesale power rates over the last 10 years. It's represented by the blue line on the bottom. And that's compared to the weighted regional average cost of electricity in Minnesota, which is the red line up top. You can see that our rates have always been below the competition in the state, which is good. A decade or so ago, our rates were just over 4% below the weighted regional average cost of electricity. But we've really focused in the past decade on cost control, business improvements, evolving our generation portfolio, and making smart investments in transmission and other assets to improve this competitive position that we have. And so this year we're about 13, almost 14% below the weighted regional average cost of electricity. And this is an advantage that our members have, and they don't take for granted. They very much appreciate it because every little bit helps right now. We've had a lot of issues with inflation and fuel costs and different costs really spiraling out of control. It's good to have wholesale power that's pretty reasonable like this. Now, this comparison does not include the value of the retirement of patronage capital. That's not me.
Somebody's heartbeat.
Is that my heartbeat? No, I don't have that yet. I don't have that yet.
Your pacemaker.
Whatever that did, it did it. Okay. Keep that handy. whatever that is. We retire as a cooperative. We retire patronage capital. We started doing that in 2019, and we've done it for the last 5 years. And if you include the value of the retirement of patronage capital, our rates are about 16% below the average. So really a strong position from a competitive standpoint. Okay, next slide. Looking forward, we work with our board of directors and a member manager group who review our 10-year rate forecast fairly frequently. And we're predicting rates to be relatively flat for the next decade. We don't see a big change in the rates from where they are today. In fact, according to the current forecasts, our rates 10 years from now will be a little bit below where they are today. And this is not inflation adjusted. This is in real dollars. If we showed you an inflation adjusted chart, you would see this going down, our rates going down 3 or 4% per year. But this is just in real dollars. And so we expect these rates to be relatively flat. And I think what's significant about this is this rate forecast includes the impact of compliance with all federal and state laws, including Minnesota's most recent carbon-free by 2040 legislation, which I'll talk a little bit about near the end. But this forecast really includes all of those things. So we're quite bullish on the way things look over the course of the next 10 years or so. Just some highlights over the course of the past year. I mentioned the patronage capital retirement, $25 million. It's the largest amount of patronage capital we've retired since we started doing that. When GERI was formed back in 1999, we had an equity level of just 6%. And we put ourselves on a financial plan to build up to 20% equity, at which point we would begin retirement of capital credits. We got there a bit earlier than we had planned, so we got there in 2018. So starting in 2019, the retirement of patronage capital began for our members. It will continue beyond this point, maybe not at the $25 million level. It's a pretty hefty payout for us, but nevertheless, there it is. In addition to that, we were able to issue bill credits to our members of $38 million. Now, on a $1 billion cost of service, this is just over 3.5%. So it's a fairly significant refund back to the members. When we set our forecasted budgets for each year, to the extent costs come in below what we were expecting or revenues come in higher than we were expecting, we end up with excess margins. And unlike, well, I don't mean to pick on Minnesota, but unlike the state of Minnesota, we don't look for ways to spend it right away. We just give it back to the people that gave it to us in the first place. And that's what this is. We will look at things like retained earnings to offset future construction projects for the benefit of the membership, or, as is the case in 2022, simply a bill credit. And in fact, for the past 6 years now, we've just given a bill credit back to the members. So that's that $38 million. We're in the capital markets very frequently. We get all of our funding from the capital markets, and so we have ratings from all 3 major rating agencies. Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch. Our ratings are very strong investment grade ratings, A3, A-, A-. That's about as strong as it gets for utilities, which is good. All of those ratings have been recently reaffirmed, and we have a stable outlook. So no surprises there. Our strong credit rating enables us to borrow money at extraordinarily low interest costs when those savings go directly back to our member owners. We're just very happy about that. One of the bigger projects that we have worked on in the past year was the sale of Coal Creek Station. This was our flagship, our last really remaining coal plant, a flagship 1,100 megawatt coal plant in North Dakota. And we sold that plant. We were going to shut it down or sell it. We found a buyer, so we sold the plant. Our decision to get that plant out of our portfolio was based purely on economics. We found that there were cheaper ways to meet the needs of our membership through a combination of lots of wind power backed up by lots of natural gas peaking plants. It was cheaper to do it that way than to run a 45-year-old coal plant 24/7, 365. And that's why we made the decision to sell that plant. Now, when we sold it, we entered into a contract with Rainbow Energy, which is the company that bought Coal Creek Station. We entered into a contract to buy all of the output from Coal Creek Station for the first year. And that contract ended in February of this year, and starting in March of this year, the amount of energy that we're buying from Rainbow dropped from 1,100 megawatts down to 328 megawatts, and it will stay there through the end of the decade. It's a good way to bridge the time between getting rid of Coal Creek Station and when some other resources will be coming online. The other thing we did related to the sale of Coal Creek Station is we retained about 400 megawatts of capacity on the DC line. This is the transmission line between Coal Creek Station, which is in the center of North Dakota, and that line runs right really to the Twin Cities. We retained 400 megawatts of capacity on that line, and we're currently developing the largest single wind farm in the state of North Dakota, and the largest single wind farm in our portfolio, called the Discovery Wind Project, ironically enough, right next to Coal Creek Station. And once that wind farm is online at the end of 2025, we will transmit all of the energy produced right to the Twin Cities, which is the big load sink for Minnesota, for our region. So we're very happy about that development as well. In addition to the 400 megawatt wind deal that I just mentioned, we have another 466 megawatts under contract. These are projects that aren't built yet, but under contract. As you recall, we have 960 megawatts already of wind. So we'll be adding over 860 more megawatts between now and the end of 2025. So wind is going to become a very significant part of our portfolio. I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Regional transmission investments, I know it's a big issue here because we're MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, which governs the transmission investments, the coordination of that, has announced $10 billion in new transmission projects throughout MISO's footprint, and $2 billion of that is right here in the state of Minnesota, and some of the lines are coming right through your area. When MISO builds out transmission in our region, all local utilities, including Great River Energy, pays their pro rata share of those new investments. And the only way to offset that increased cost for transmission is actually to be an investor in the transmission lines that are getting built. Because as an investor in those transmission lines, we earn a return on that investment, and that return offsets the costs that we're otherwise paying for those lines having been built. So Great River Energy will be investing about $550 million of the $2 billion that's going to be spent in the state of Minnesota. And all of those transmission projects should be online by the end of this decade. So a lot of heavy lifting going on there. Sort of related to the sale of Coal Creek Station, but not really. These really came about different ways. We sold our 70% interest in Midwest Ag Energy last year as well. Now, Midwest Ag Energy is a holding company that we started back in 2006, and it's a holding company that has 2 ethanol plants and a fairly large corn drying and storage facility, all in North Dakota. And the reason we got into that business to begin with is we built the 2 ethanol plants adjacent to existing coal plants, and we used waste steam from the coal plants to fuel the ethanol making process. Neither of our plants had boilers, the ethanol plants. They were very unique in this market. served the membership very well, but once we closed down Coal Creek Station, we no longer really had the nexus with the ethanol industry. So we wanted to monetize that, and it was actually a good time to monetize an investment in an ethanol holding company. Over the time that we owned Midwest Ag Energy, members benefited to the tune of about $225 million. So it was a very good investment for us, but it was time to get out. A little bit of bragging rights here about Great River Energy, some neat things going on. We are certified once again as a great place to work. We have this is our 7th year in a row of that designation. We have an employee engagement index of 89%, which is very high. I think the national average is around 50% or 51%. So we're at 89%. What that means is all of our employees know full well what our mission is, and it's to serve you. It's to look out for your interests. Every day, every employee that comes to work at Great River Energy, they're thinking about you. And Justin, I didn't warn you this, but you know what I'm about to say, the fictional customer, right? Justin's heard this before and he didn't know what I was talking about. So when we talk at GRE strategically about things that are going on, we'll ask ourselves this question: what would the dry cleaner in Braham think? Literally, that's what we ask. That's a fictional customer. One time, Justin overheard me say that. He said, "We don't have a dry cleaner." And I said, "Perfect. We can keep using that as the example. We don't have to change. We don't have to change it." But the dry cleaner is great. That's what we look out for every day. And our employees like our mission statement. They like working for you, and it shows up in this Great Place to Work certification. We also received a perfect score of 100 Corporate Equality Index. This is our DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion matrix. We're very proud of that. Also the 8th year in a row of being voted the healthiest 100 employers in America. This is a designation that we first got several years ago. We've remained on that list, top 100 employers in the nation for health programs. We know that our employees are our most valuable asset, and we believe we have the best in the business. And it's the right thing to do, not just to make sure that they're taken care of physically, but also mentally. And we have a lot of programs in place to help our employees navigate through this crazy time that we're sort of all in right now. It's the right thing to do for our employees, but it also has a very sound business reason for it as well. We are self-insured for medical costs. We are self-insured. And so to the extent our employees are healthy, we have seen a marked decrease in the cost of our health care, which is a wonderful thing. So it really works out for us. And I was so happy that we honored the veterans before we started the meeting. And you'll like to hear this, we're a Beyond the Yellow Ribbon company, which are the programs that we have in place for our employees who are veterans, and also for active reservists who are in the employ of Great River Energy. So we're very, very happy about that. Okay, next slide, let's talk about generation for a little bit. Excuse me, Linda and Joe and everybody, Lonnie, they know I drink coffee all the time, and I just can't talk without drinking my coffee, so I apologize if that bothers you. They're all used to it. They're all used to it by now. A little bit about MISO, again, the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator that dictates a lot of things that we do as a utility, requires all utilities to have 100% capacity to meet their peak demands, plus a reserve margin of 8%. So the way to think about it is you have to have 108% of your peak demand. And for Great River Energy, that's 2,500 megawatts. Great River Energy has always had more than 108% capacity to meet its requirements. Our 10-year forecast is, as far as we go out, we will be long on capacity each and every year for the next decade. So we don't have an issue with capacity whatsoever. In fact, Minnesota doesn't have an issue with capacity. Most of the utilities in Minnesota are long on capacity right now. The reason I bring that up, last summer there was a series of articles about MISO running short on capacity. And of course the predictions were that we would see brownouts and blackouts and service interruptions and dogs and cats living together and just all of it. My phone was ringing off the hook. And we didn't know what anybody really was talking about. Well, technically those articles were correct, but the impact of the implications of what they were reporting on were just really overblown. What happened is there were a few utilities in Indiana and Illinois, which are a part of MISO, that had some problems with some of their portfolio, their power plants. We had some unexpected outages. and they fell slightly below their 108%. And what that did is, actually they kind of fell significantly below it. But what that did in MISO is instead of all the utilities in MISO having 108% of their expected peak demand, the collective group had 107% of their peak demand. So we were below, right? We did fall short, but at no time last year did we ever come close to hitting coincident peak demand, let alone eat into those reserve margins. We never came close to that. So it was really overblown, I think, quite a bit. Those utilities were very quickly required to go to a capacity auction and purchase capacity from utilities that had excess capacity. That included Great River Energy. We sold excess capacity to those utilities for $70 million. It was a very steep price for them to pay. They won't do it again. I can guarantee you that. Very steep price for them to pay. But that's how the market corrects itself. So the story is technically true, but the implications of it, I think, quite a bit overblown. So how do we meet our requirements to MISO? What does our portfolio look like today? Remember 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were about 85% coal. 85% of our generation came from coal. Today, it has changed very dramatically. The last 15 years, we've been in earnest. We've been evolving this portfolio. And today we have a portfolio that we really like. I mentioned the importance of peaking plants, the natural gas-fired peaking plants. We have 1,400 megawatts of peak. Keep in mind our peak demand, 2,500 megawatts. So 1,400 megawatts in peaking plants. And our peaking plants are large, they are efficient, and they're new. And so they serve us very, very well. When we need the energy, we can hit the switch and get 1,400 megawatts from those facilities. They're all dual fuel, except the one right here in Cambridge. We're trying to get that one dual fuel. It should take place here within the next year or so. I already mentioned the 960 megawatts of wind that we already have in our portfolio. When we add the other 866 that's currently under contract, we'll have over 1,800 megawatts of wind in our portfolio. It was not more than 11 or 12 years ago that we had zero wind in our portfolio. And today, we're on the cusp of having almost 2,000 megawatts of wind. Very happy about that. I mentioned the contract with Rainbow, 328 megawatts. We also have a contract for hydropower for Manitoba Hydro, 200 megawatts. 100 megawatts at Spearwood Station. This is our combined heat and power plant in North Dakota. And then we also have member resources. Under our contracts that we have with East Central and all of the other members, our members can self-generate up to 5% of their total load from renewables that you own and you build and you offset the purchases from GRE. Well, that just changed literally days ago to 10%. Just increased to 10%. The member manager group, this is all the CEOs of the distribution systems that we serve, got together and some wanted the opportunity to self-supply more of their own energy. And Justin Johns was the chair of the committee that took that on. And if I was a betting man, I would have put a 10% chance on getting consensus from all members to increase the 5% to 10%. Justin got it done in under a year. And got lightning fast approval from the RUS, which was terrific. A round of applause is in order for you for that, because that's a huge accomplishment. And it was served you very well. It was served you very well. I'm really happy that he was able to do that. The thing not list, of course, we don't list short-term contracts on our list of generation, so you won't see any of it, but we do have some short-term contracts in place. We also don't include on our list of generation our load control programs. Great River Energy has the second highest percentage load control program of any utility in America. We can control 366 megawatts. So when our demand is increasing, we're seeing it's usually on a hot day or a very cold day, we see demand increasing. Those of you that participate in load control programs know what that's all about. We flip a switch, we turn off the water heater, your air conditioner, whatever it happens to be, for a period of time, and you help us avoid the highest prices in the MISO marketplace. And we pass those savings, right along to you through those program benefits. But we can shave 360 megawatts off of our peak demand just through those load control programs. We've registered about 200 megawatts of that with MISO, and so we get credit for that capacity in the MISO marketplace, which is really, really terrific. Last thing I want to talk about, we'll go on the next slide, is Minnesota's latest legislation that impacts us. Somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, so don't quote me on this, but somebody told me that in this legislative session, the number of bills that have been introduced, I think it was over 6,000. It's mind-numbing is what it is. 400, now I was told this, I don't know that it's true, but I was told this by somebody I trust, 400 impacts the electric utility industry. 400. Thank goodness we have, lobbyists and all sorts of smart people down in St. Paul every day following this stuff. I just got an update in my car when I pulled into this parking lot when I got here tonight from the lobbyists in St. Paul. More things going on. But the big piece of legislation, and you probably heard about this, Minnesota now has the most restrictive law on the books of any state, requiring all utilities to get all their generation from carbon-free resources by the year 2040. At first blush, that's problematic, but you really need to peel back the layers of it to understand that it's not such a problem for us, and I'll tell you why. Okay? There are a few milestones. First of all, this legislation did not take us by surprise. We've known for years that we needed to prepare for a carbon-constrained future. We've known this for years, and all utilities have known this for years. So we've taken steps. You see in the portfolio, the prior slide, the steps that we've taken to evolve our generation portfolio to meet laws like this. Now, we didn't think it would come in this form or necessarily from the state of Minnesota, but we knew it was coming. So this really was no surprise to us. And I think we're pretty well positioned for it, to be honest. There are 3 milestones in the legislation that we need to pay attention to, and you should be aware of. The first occurs in 2030, which requires cooperatives like Great River Energy to be 60% carbon-free. That's just 7 years, about 6.5 years away or so. There's a check mark there. We're already almost 60% carbon-free today. So without changing our planning whatsoever, we're already at that first milestone. That's not a problem for us. The second milestone, 2035, requiring us to be 90% carbon-free. There's a check mark there too. Just based on the economics of making smart decisions for our portfolio, we are going to be at 90% carbon-free in any event. It's not being driven by this legislation. It's just what we've decided to do in our own economic, selfish interests. We're going to be at 90% carbon-free anyway. Remember, by this date, the rainbow contracts fall off and the additional wind is online. And that's how we get to the 90%. It's very easy. This last 10% is a bit trickier, right? All utilities in the upper Midwest, not just Minnesota, but the upper Midwest, because we have a lot of wind here, will say that they can quite easily get to 85% carbon-free, maybe 90% carbon-free. It's the last 10% that's problematic. Yep, that's exactly right. That last 10% is a bit tough for us. There are things that we can do to meet this last milestone. We can buy some output from a nuclear plant, or increase our hydro purchases, or invest in geothermal or modular nuclear facilities. There are a lot of things we can do on the generation side, but if we did nothing on the generation side to get to the last 10%, there are 2 provisions in the Minnesota law that Great River Energy drafted and lobbied for and got the authors, both in the House and the Senate, to adopt and include in the law. And they're listed here. The first is utilities are allowed to use renewable energy credits to offset their carbon emissions. Now, we generate renewable energy credits from all the renewables that we have in our system. Remember that we 1,800 megawatts of wind. We get those RECs to meet Minnesota's renewable energy standard, because that's a whole different thing than carbon-free, right? We get a lot of credits from the wind that we have just to meet Minnesota's renewable mandate, but we can use those same credits to offset our carbon emissions. And we will generate enough credits from the wind that we have to offset our carbon emissions related primarily to our natural gas plants. Now, if we weren't almost 90% carbon-free, we wouldn't have enough credits to make it this last 10%. But because we're so close anyway, we know that we're going to have enough renewable energy credits to offset that last 10%. So we feel pretty good. A lot of that goes to offset the carbon from our peaking plants. Our peaking plants only run 5 or 6% of the time. 5 or 6% of the year. But when they run, we really need them to run. Under this law, if we didn't have this provision, we would be prohibited from running those peaking plants after 2040. But because this provision is in Minnesota's law, we'll be able to run those peaking plants just as we do today. So that's one thing that makes us feel kind of okay with this legislation. The second thing is we buy a lot of energy in the market when it's economic to do so. And the assumption up until now has been everything in the market is carbon-based. And so you'd have to count that against yourself as you're buying power in the market. That's no longer the case. Under this law, the Public Utilities Commission in Minnesota is required to determine the amount of generation in the marketplace on an annual basis that is carbon-free. And to the extent the generation in the market is not carbon-free, utilities have to offset that percentage, but not all of their market purchases. Right now, the market's about 50-50, carbon-free and not carbon-free. The carbon-free portion will continue getting more and more as we get closer to this 2040 date, so it becomes less and less of a burden to offset these things. So that's why we feel with the use of the RECs, we can easily offset both our peaking plants and the market purchases. So not every utility is as sanguine as we are about it, but I think because we've been anticipating this happening for a while, we feel like we're just really well positioned to withstand something like this. We didn't oppose this legislation. We didn't support this legislation. We were silent on this legislation. But now that it's the law of Minnesota, we have no concerns about meeting it really whatsoever. So it's been a busy legislative session. A little inside tip for you: before every legislative session in St. Paul, Gregory, I, and our general counsel go to St. Paul. We meet with the leadership of the House and the Senate. This is before they begin their session. And for 18 years, I've been CEO for 18 years. We've asked for the same thing for 18 years. In St. Paul. You know what that is? Nothing. And the joke is, one of these years we just might get it. It wasn't this year. Okay. Well, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here. It's been a real pleasure. Justin, you're a rock star, and I really appreciate when you reached out to come up to your meeting. Sure. When do you want questions? Right now, Justin?
We'll maybe take some questions after we get done, and if there's wholesale, we can cover those then too.
Okay, I'll be around for the questions. Yep. As long as it's an easy one. Last thing I want to mention while Justin's coming up here, we are big supporters of all the community involvement that electric cooperatives are involved in the communities. It's what makes the communities served by electric cooperatives so special. And we particularly are big fans of your Operation Roundup program. I think it's an absolutely terrific way to contribute to your neighbors. And so I do have a check with me, which I will give to Justin for $1,000 for the employees of Great Energy to East Central's Operation Roundup program. So Justin, good job on that program. You guys do great work.
Well, I have to say, Great River Energy is a wonderful partner in our industry. They really bring such a balanced approach. So whether you're left of center, right of center, extreme right, extreme left, they bring renewables, they bring carbon, reduced power supply, and they also ensure reliability. So I couldn't be more proud for East Central Energy to be a member of Great River Energy in the future that they represent. So I invited David, but we also wanted to get a little something out of him, and he shared that check, and so we're really happy to have that.
We mail those anyway.
Right. Check in hand, a little bird in the hand, right? So GRE donates to Operation Roundup every year, and for those who aren't familiar, Operation Roundup program allows all of you as members to round your bill up every month to the nearest dollar. Or you can make a donation in any amount. And the money that's collected is pooled, and then a trust board meets quarterly to disperse those funds. And in 2022, ECE provided over $71,000 to local organizations. And so here to collect that check from Great River Energy is Stacy Kunke, Operation Roundup's board president. So let's thank Stacy for the work that she does. report is in your registration bag, and it contains a lot of detailed information about 2022. So I'm going to touch on just a few of those items. Technology is great when it works. If you'd like to follow along, please open your annual report to the first 2 pages. Feel free to jot down any questions you have, and I'll ask you to hold those until I finish with my comments. 2022 was a busy year for East Central Energy, including 2 exciting major projects. We officially formed a fiber internet business, which you can see in the back. We have a booth back there. Dennis and Hannah would be happy to talk to you about the future of that. And we also worked toward a municipal acquisition within the city of North Branch. Of course, the year has challenges as well, including power supply issues and rising costs, which continue today. January of 2022 was a big month for the fiber internet project. We continued our work from 2021 and divided project teams into 3 sections: campaign, technical, and strategy. Our engineering and operations teams also determined the type of aerial fiber cable that we plan to use. It's a single-mode aerial dielectric self-support, also known as ADSS. It's non-metallic, and it's safe to hang just 12 inches below our power poles, and that's 12 inches below the neutral on our power poles, and that's significant because every time we cross a road, every time we cross a driveway, we need to maintain clearances. And by choosing ADSS, it means we'll be spending less money getting our poles prepped for our internet construction, which is going to begin soon. In February, we provided electric vehicle safety training free of charge to area fire departments. One training was held in Superior and another in Braham. A total of 105 attendees learned about electric vehicles, their myths, and how to respond when there's a crash. By working together with local first responders for this training, EV drivers can be assured of safer responses in the event of an accident. And as a 20-year now retired firefighter, I can tell you a lot of the firefighters felt a lot safer learning about how to handle those vehicles. So I think it was a great service to our community. As spring approached, I had the privilege of testifying in a Senate committee hearing for an amendment meant to help reduce the cost of replacing load control receivers. How many folks in the room have off-peak programs on their homes? Show of hands, please. Wonderful, love it. And that bill reduced the cost by allowing inspections on devices that are exchanged only if they have wiring deficiencies. We have approximately 15,000 of those devices in the field, and they're going to be upgraded in the coming years. As stewards of our members' money, ECE is always concerned about any increase in expenses, and I was glad to represent Minnesota cooperatives in that conversation. We were also proud to share our first Environmental, Social, and Governance, or ESG, report with our members. If you're not familiar with an ESG report, this is something that's typically required by for-profit businesses to disclose more about their overall impact. As a not-for-profit cooperative, we voluntarily chose to create that report. You might ask yourself why. Well, we wanted to share and be more transparent by offering a document to highlight some of the ways we take our responsibilities seriously. The 2022 ESG report has been provided in your registration bag. By combining sensible governance with an eye on the environment and our own social responsibility, the rural roots of East Central Energy will continue to branch out long into the future. In May, 9 high schools accepted our invitation, or maybe challenge, to create a tiny library for a contest. We saw some incredibly creative projects. Over 8,000 votes were cast, and Northwestern High School ultimately won the $500 grand prize with 3,800 votes. June opened with one of the most impactful summer storms since 2011. The storm that plowed through really did a number on our equipment, and it became a multi-day event. At its peak, over 11,000 members were without power, and about 45 poles were broken. Our members, all of you, were incredibly supportive and understood that we can't control Mother Nature, and we have to place safety at the forefront of all of our decisions. There's nothing more important to me than knowing that our folks that are in the field have the ability to go home safely every day. And we appreciate your patience during those storm events. Later that month, we held a meet and greet for the North Branch Water and Light customers. The topics of conversation included energy rates, the many cooperative benefits available to the North Branch Water and Light customers, and more. Our board also unanimously approved the purchase agreement for the service territory. As the month came to a close, we celebrated National Pollinator Week with a pollen neighbor party at Certified Organic Sapsucker Farms, featuring a food truck, trivia prizes, a scavenger hunt, and native plants. We were also recognized for our second year of partnership with the Monarch Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances, plus over 4,000 habitat acres, 12 times above our target. In July, 130 applications were received for the newly reconvened Member Resource Council. The board selected 2 members from each director district, and we appointed a representative from the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. We continue to meet with these members and can't wait to see what the future holds. August was a milestone month for our fiber internet project. We applied for $19.8 million as part of the Minnesota border-to-border grant opportunity. This required 92 files containing hundreds of documents, maps, financial information, letters of support, and pledges of financial support from various cities, counties, and townships. The summer ended with the 7th consecutive year of our Teacher Totes project. ECE employees delivered school supplies to teachers, including label makers, laminating machines, headphones, and snacks. The items were donated by ECE in partnership with Cobank. And I can tell you this is a project that the teachers in particular really appreciate. I think if we all knew how much of their own money and effort teachers put into our schools, we'd probably be somewhat embarrassed, frankly. As part of our commitment to community, in October we donated to and helped distribute food with Cambridge Surplus Food Distribution. It was a chilly afternoon, but we were glad to support our members. We also sent home a 4-pack of LED lights to the 230 households that visited. On December 8th, the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development awarded ECE 3 Minnesota border-to-border broadband development grants totaling nearly $15 million. We also filled our first FiberNet internet position of broadband manager for a much lower cost. We were able to secure 3 buildings in the area to accommodate the additional storage necessary for the rollout of fiber internet in 2023. I can tell you that we have over 700 miles of fiber waiting to be put up already, so we're getting ready to go. The most impactful major outage event in 10 years occurred on December 14th, which was my 20th wedding anniversary, to the 17th, with 12,284 members affected at the peak and affecting over 25,000 of our members total. The combination of heavy wet snow and nearly 2 feet of accumulation made for back-breaking work for crews in the field, and it taxed us both physically and mentally. It required 19 outside crews to assist ECE in our restoration efforts. We always appreciate the way communities come together, especially during situations like major storms. Let's take a minute to look at 2022's finances. The cost of services, equipment, and products have continued to increase in price while lead times fluctuate, causing difficulty in project completion dates and cost completion estimates. In 2022, ECE's total operating revenue was almost $134 million. Residential sales, including seasonal sales, accounted for about 68% of our revenue, while our commercial and industrial sales contributed around 28%. Capital credits and other revenue accounted for about 3%. We were able to pay out $3.3 million in capital credits to our members, which includes both general retirements and estates that were paid out after a member passed. In total, ECE has returned over $101 million to members over the years. As a member of this cooperative, you help provide capital that allows us to deliver electricity to you, and we use it prudently. When there is a margin over the cost to operate, all patronage revenue is allocated to you in the form of capital credits. Purchase power, the majority of which we buy from Great River Energy, accounted for nearly 59% of ECE's uses of revenue. Interest, taxes, and depreciation contribute about 13% to our cost, and the expenses we can control represent about 21%, which includes our member accounts and service, administrative, and distribution costs. Margins accounted for about 7%, and making a margin every year is necessary to meet our loan obligations. If you have any questions about the contents of the executive or annual report, please feel free to ask your questions tonight or ask us anytime. Before we get to any questions you have, I want to talk about two major projects of 2022, and that is the North Branch acquisition and fiber internet. As a reminder, in 2021, the City of North Branch decided it was in the best interest of its customers and frankly its residents to wind down the utility, affecting homes and businesses within the City of North Branch. Over the years, we built a good relationship with the city, and we felt that as neighbors, we should remain available during their time of need. It took over 200 meetings, 10,000 emails, and a lot of discussion. But today, those 2,025 North Branch customers are now members of East Central Energy. It's not often that a municipal utility is acquired by a cooperative, and we learned a lot along the way. The second major project of last year was now named ECE Fiber. In 2019, a feasibility study determined that the broadband business just wasn't financially viable. When we took another look in 2021, additional funding lessened the risk. We worked through 2022 to explore the possibility, and during their October board meeting, our directors unanimously approved a resolution to enter the fiber internet business. We also decided to include broadband as a department within ECE's current structure rather than a separate LLC. And so probably a lot of people have a question of what does that mean for me? Well, it means that members who take internet will be members of East Central Energy just the same way that they are as electric members. They'll generate capital credits eventually, and they'll be able to participate in elections just as you do now as electric members. And the next question that usually comes is, well, is that going to cause my electric rates to go up? There's a complicated answer to that, and that's because we have a very strong financial picture for this organization, and we're going to use that to develop a solution for the internet and the digital divide, frankly, that exists in our service territory. And so as we move forward, our commitment is to be responsible financially and make every attempt to deliver on the promise that started in 1936, which is to serve the members of these communities. At this point, we'd like to take any questions you have. I have the executive team members here with me, Vice President and CFO Lisa Procker, Vice President and Chief Information Officer Ty Hoagland, and Vice President and Chief Operating Officer Andy Olson. His basement was flooded, by the way, so I'm really glad to see him here. So we're able to take any questions you have now. We have a microphone available, and we're happy to run that to you. If you just raise your hand, we'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
I'm Richard Bronson, and I have a question. We're talking about this power capacity and everything else, generating capacity. The legislature mandating all these cars, electric cars, on the grid. What effect is that going to have on electrical grid?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, and what I'll tell you about that is it's going to take some time. The average vehicle on the road has a lifespan somewhere between 20 and 25 years. So while electric vehicles are becoming more and more popular, it's going to take a lot of time before they start to turn over. And I just read an article today. The other benefit we have is, I don't know if you've looked around, but people around here probably aren't going to be the first people to buy electric vehicles, right? And so a lot of utilities along the coast, and frankly in the south, are going to experience a lot of growth in that area before we ever do. And so we're going to get to learn from their successes and their potential mistakes, and we're going to be able to implement programs. We have electric water heaters on our system that we charge overnight. Raise your hand if you have a storage water heater in your home. Right, so all of those water heaters run at a time when power supply is generally at a higher availability, and we do that through a radio receiver that controls that water heater. So as electric vehicles become more prevalent, we're going to continue to develop programs that incentivize and encourage people to charge their electric vehicle when there's more electricity available on the grid. I'm not here to tell you that we have it all figured out, because we don't. But as things continue along, there will be new resources developed and programs to level out the demand. Because the reality is, if everybody came home at 5 p.m. and plugged their electric vehicle in, we'd have a serious problem. So it's a great question, and one that's on all of our minds. Thank you.
Dan, this is Ben from North Branch. Last summer, they put in fiber cable in front of my place. Is that something that you can use, or are you going to have to put your own cable in?
Well, I can tell you, admittedly, we are new to the telecommunications business in a lot of ways, but what I'm learning and what we're figuring out is a lot of that fiber was put in place, and it was never intended to serve the homes that have passed by. It could have been a grant to serve a cell tower. It could have been a grant to serve a business. It could have been a business that paid to have that fiber put in, but it was never designed to provide internet to the homes that had passed by, and that's really unfortunate, because I mean, if I had a nickel for every time someone said exactly what you just said, it happens a lot. The reality is, it's our intention to own and operate our entire fiber network. We're going to own the backbone. We're going to own all the radial feeds to the homes and the drops that go to the home. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, we can control the infrastructure. And I think that the important thing to remember about broadband is that the retail portion of it is important, right? Whether it's for education, telemedicine, work from home, there's a lot of reasons why having a robust fiber network in this community would be amazing. But the reality is, the value to the electric distribution system could eventually be larger, right? So those electric cars, we might someday need to talk to those cars and say, okay, it's okay to charge now, and now it's not okay to charge, and you won't have to do anything except for wake up and have a charged vehicle in the morning. Or the water heaters that we have out there, new things that are coming along, as well as being able to talk to our substations and equipment all on the line. And so this communication network really is about retail broadband to the membership, but it's about a lot more in the long run.
Are you concerned at all about all the agricultural land you're going to take up with all these wind farms and solar panels? And besides that, are they really that green when they last about 20 years, or wind panels were even less? They're not really recyclable?
I didn't think we'd have any political questions tonight. No, it's a great question. And
When land comes out of production, it never goes back to production.
yeah, so I didn't hear the last part, I'm sorry.
When land comes out of production,
Yep.
ag land, it never goes back to production, whether it's housing, strip malls, windmills,
Yep.
solar panels, etc.
Yep, no, and it's a great question. I don't mean to make light of it. The reality is, landowners have a right to do what they will with their land, but there's a serious concern about food supply in this country and frankly in the world. The United States is a major food supplier, and to see that happen at scale, it can be alarming. Now, the reality of wind farms is, many times they can coexist very well with agricultural situations. Farmers are still able to farm around them. There's a small footprint because it's just a tower there. Solar panels obviously are different. They take up large tracts of land. And there's a very, very intentional process among solar developers to look for low-cost land. Well, what land is low cost? Land that's not good for agriculture, right? And so it really is important that as solar is developed, that it's developed in places where it makes sense to develop it. And I think there's a bit of a component of supply and demand to that, right? You probably aren't going to see a lot of solar farms go into very rich soil in southern Minnesota, but you may see it in land that's unfarmable, right? Untillable. And so that's what I can offer to you. But the reality is, in America, people have a choice what they want to do with their land. And counties and townships can certainly create zoning ordinances about what can happen with that. But from our perspective, we just would urge developers to look for land that's less optimal for other uses such as farming. Okay, I can't hear that good, so it's good.
Somehow we got lucky and we had fiber go past our place last year, and it was great. They came and hooked it up to the house, and we got TV with no pixelation, and it doesn't disappear when it rains too hard, and it's just great. So, good job.
Well, that wasn't us yet. But we hope maybe when we come by, they'll maybe hook up with us. But no, it is. It's amazing. And I'll tell you, I live just a little bit out of town in Pine City. And I have Starlink now, which is good. It's also very expensive, and it's not great. And so I think, getting fiber to the home for our membership is really, it's important, and you just spoke to the importance of having it available. So we definitely want to see more of that happen.
I don't understand how it can be somebody besides us, because the bill, I don't get two bills, I get just one bill with ECE on it, and I'm only paying one bill.
Sure. Well, I can promise you it's not ECE that's providing you with internet. But we can talk later, and we'll maybe sort it out.
Okay, if we want to talk a little more political, right?
Perfect.
Is our grid hardened enough to protect us from an EMP?
Sure. So for those who aren't aware, EMP is an electromagnetic pulse, often the product, in theory, of a detonated nuclear bomb at a low altitude, and that can cause an electromagnetic pulse, which can destroy a lot of equipment. And I think the safe answer to your question is no, it's not. And I don't think that there's, I've read a lot of articles about even the theory of protecting the grid, whether it's substations, equipment in your home. It's unrealistic at this point in time with the technology that exists and the amount of hardware that's vulnerable to an EMP to suggest that we could begin to protect from that. And I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you than that, but that is a worldwide concern. And I don't know, concern, it's a worldwide vulnerability, right? The good news is, I was in DC just the last few days, and the number of fighter jets that I saw flying around there, I don't think there's a lot of people getting across our airspace that aren't supposed to be there. So,
Do we have any idea what our fiber optic service is going to cost us when you do get it installed?
we have a couple of fine ECE employees in the back there that have some pamphlets for you. I think the entry level is $64.99, and I think the top end is about $120 a month. So I think that's quite affordable. The lowest entry is 100 megabits by 100 megabits per second, both ways, so up and down. So if you're watching video, you can get it good, and if you're live streaming, you can get good service for that as well.
I have a question for David. In the last Advantage pamphlet we got in our bill, it was talking about iron-made batteries. And I'd like to touch on that subject a little bit if you could.
Yeah, we got an exciting project pretty close to here.
Thank you for that question. It's about Form Energy, which is a company out of Massachusetts that's developed a technology for long-duration battery storage using air over iron technology. It's not a really new technology, but it's a new application for it. We are building the first beta test battery in Cambridge at our peaking plant in Cambridge, and should be online by 2025. It's 1.5 megawatts. And if it works according to what they say, it will be able to discharge over 100 hours. That's a game changer for us. Lithium ion is 4 hours, and it's worthless to a G&T. It's worthless to a wholesaler. It has some applications at the distribution level, but from a power supply standpoint, it's worthless. So long duration battery storage could be very, very significant. We know we're on the right track because right after we announced our deal, several other utilities have now contracted with Form Energy to install similar beta testing, including Xcel Energy. They're putting in a 10 megawatt. And we encourage that because we want to see what our 1.5 megawatt battery, how that performs. We want to see then how the 10 megawatt performs. There's now a 30 megawatt that's being proposed. And this is really, really good. We've identified a need just within Great River Energy for 300 megawatts of long-duration battery storage. The reason it's not on any list is because the technology is not perfected. And so we're trying to get the technology proven here, and if it does prove out, we'll be looking at a fairly substantial long-duration battery storage project? Great question.
Other questions? That's it? All right, well, thank you for taking the opportunity to ask your questions. At this time, I'd like to welcome our board chair, Linda Lytla, back to the stage.
It's definitely a disadvantage to be short up here. Thank you, Justin. Are there any objections to approving the executive report? Hearing no objections, the report will stand approved. There is no old business to be taken up at this time. Our bylaws require that all resolutions must be submitted in writing prior to the annual business meeting, and we have received no resolutions this year. Is there any new business? Is there any new business? Is there any new business? All right. Our thanks to the members who serve on the Credentials and Election Committee. Their job is to oversee the election process and to certify the voting results. According to ECE bylaws, directors can be nominated by a petition or by the board-approved nominations committee. This year, voting in District 4, only one candidate was nominated by petition for the available seat on the board of directors. That candidate, Thomas Schoenecker, was confirmed by the ECE Credentials and Election Committee and ECE's legal counsel and was acclaimed director. Voting by ballot was not necessary. Thomas, please stand. Be recognized. There he is, way in the back. Claire Schaff of Parker Satcham Law will announce the results for the elections in District 2, 5, and 6.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And as long as that stool is here, I'll look as tall as Justin and David. The ECE Credentials and Election Committee met on February 22nd and approved Mike Gaynor, Linda Lauderell, Jim Rosberg, and Andrew Ripkima as District 2 candidates. A total of 1,308 votes were counted. Of those ballots, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order, Mike Gaynor received 567 votes. Linda Lauderell received 524 votes. Jim Rosberg received 86 votes. And Andrew Ripkima received 131 votes. With the highest number of votes, Mike Gaynor is elected to a 4-year term in District 2. Mike, are you here today? Okay, he's right back there. The ECE Credentials and Election Committee approved Linda Lytla, Jim Reuter, Luke Stoltz, Wayne Zotke, and Jenny Zinda as District 5 candidates. A total of 1,140 votes were counted. Of those ballots, again in alphabetical order, Linda Lytla received 522 votes. Jim Reuter received 69 votes. Luke Stoltz received 275 votes. Wayne Zotke received 197 votes. And Jenny Zinda received 77 votes. With the highest number of votes, Linda Lidala is elected to a 4-year term in District 5. The ECE Credentials and Election Committee approved Mike Engmark, Jim Jessic, and Rick Stevens as District 6 candidates. A total of 1,120 votes were counted. Of those ballots, again in alphabetical order, Mike Engmark received 343 votes, Jim Jessic received 656 votes, and Rick Stevens received 121 votes. With the highest number of votes, Jim Jessic was elected to a 1-year term in District 6. Jim, would you like to stand up? And I think, Linda, you're back up.
I can't tell you how stressful that was. Thank you. Thank you to everyone who made time to attend ECE's annual meeting this year. We'd like to hear your thoughts about today's meeting. Please share your comments or suggestions on the survey form found in your registration card. We'll collect the surveys as you exit. There is no further business to come before this body. And hearing no objection, the 2023 ECE annual meeting is adjourned.